All righty. Good afternoon and welcome to Scottsdale Development Review Board remote public meeting. Until further notice, our meetings are being held electronically and remotely. While physical facilities are not open to the public, meetings are being televised on Cox Cable Channel 11 and streamed online at scottsdaleaz.gov. Search for live stream to allow the public. This allows the public to listen and to view the meeting in progress. Spoken comments are being accepted on agenda items, and to sign up to speak, you may submit a form no later than 90 minutes before the start of the meeting. And written comment is also being accepted for both agendized and non-agendized items, and should also be submitted electronically at least 90 minutes before the meetings. Comments submitted are emailed to Development Review Board members prior to the meeting, and you'll find the links to submit requests on our meeting agenda. So the purpose of the Development Review Board is to maintain the quality of development in Scottsdale by reviewing all of the design aspects of a proposed development and the relationship of its design components to the surrounding environment and community. The board also reviews all preliminary plats for residential subdivisions to assure conformance with policies and ordinance requirements. The agenda consists of a roll call, an administrative report, approval of the minutes from the prior meeting, a consent agenda, and regular agenda items. I remind our audience that the review relates to design matters and does not include consideration of existing zoning district designations, zoning entitlements, or other allowed uses within the zoning districts. The board's motion may be to approve with modified stipulations, to deny the request, or to continue the case. Thank you for your time and interest. We'll begin with a roll call.
Okay. Councilwoman Milhaven.
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
Present.
Board Member Craig.
Here.
Board Member Joyner.
Present.
Board Member Kashgari.
Here.
Board Member Faki.
Present.
Board Member Brandt.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to congratulate Mr. Craig for his reappointment to the Development Review Board. Welcome Mr. Faki back for another term on the review board. Welcome back, Ali. And to welcome Jeff Brand, the newest member of our Development Review Board. So gentlemen, thank you for being willing to volunteer your time and talents to keep Scottsdale special. So thank you very much. Next item on our agenda will be the administrative report. Mr. Carr, what do you have for us?
Thank you, Councilwoman Milhaven, and good afternoon to you and members of the Development Review Board. I also want to share your sentiment in welcoming our members, Faki and Brand, to the board, and also welcome you back, Board Member Craig. We're happy to have all you guys on board. I just want to make a quick note that as we have sent you correspondence recently regarding the annual ethics code training and updates on those, that those forms that are necessary to be filled out, you can return those to me prior to our next meeting that will be occurring in January, on January 7th. So if we have that meeting in person again, if we're returning back to in-person meeting on January 7th, you can just give those to me at that meeting. If we're not, I'll try to have those collected from you sometime before that meeting on January 7th. Another thing I want to note is obviously we have some additional information that was presented on item number 7 related to a soils report that was submitted, as well as some additional correspondence. Should have received an email to re-review those items as part of the overall packet for that item sometime earlier this week. So just want to point everybody's attention to that. And that is all for my administrative report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. The next item of business would be approval of our December 3rd, 2020 Development Review Board meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Board Commissioner, sorry, this is Doug Craig, and Councilwoman Milhaven will move to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Craig.
Minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second.
Thank you. Ms. Joyner, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approval of the minutes, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved unanimously. Next, we have consent agenda. Are there any requests from board members to remove any of the consent agenda items?
I need to take a roll call vote on that.
All righty, let's do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Millhaven,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Board Member Craig,
Yes.
Board Member Joyner,
Yes.
Board Member Gushgari,
Yes.
Board Member Faki,
Yes.
Board Member Brandt.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. So go back. So next item is the consent agenda. Did any board members, commissioners or board members want to remove any of the items from our consent agenda? All right. Do we have any requests to speak on any of the consent agenda items?
Councilwoman Milham, this is Brad. I do not have any items or have any people that want to speak on those items. Thank you.
Thank you. In that case, I'll entertain a motion to approve consent agenda items 3 through 5.
Councilwoman Millhaven, this is Board Member Craig, and I'll move to approve consent agenda item 3, 4, and 5.
Thank you, Mr. Craig.
I'll second.
And who is that?
This is Board Member Brand.
Thank you, Board Member Brand. You want to take a roll call for this as well, I assume?
Yes, please.
Thank
Thank you. Councilwoman Millhaven,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Board Member Craig,
Yes.
Board Member Joyner,
Yes.
Board Member Gushgari,
Yes.
Board Member Faki,
Yes.
and Board Member Brandt.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to the regular agenda, and we have item number 6, which is 38 DR 2020 multi-use sports fields with field lighting.
Yes, hi, good afternoon, Councilwoman Millhaven, Commissioner Smith, and members of the board. I'm Meredith Tessier with the Planning Department, and the case before you is 38 DR 2020 multi-use sport fields with field lighting. This item is on the regular agenda today as community input was received as part of the MUMSP process that expressed both support and concerns about traffic, parking, and light pollution. Next slide, please. The subject 38-acre parcel is located at the northwest corner of East Bell Road and North 94th Street as highlighted in yellow. Next slide, please. Before you is a close-up aerial of the subject site with surrounding uses that include vacant undeveloped residential to the east, multifamily and light residential to the north, vacant undeveloped industrial to the west, and mixed commercial uses to the south. Next slide, please. Before you is the proposed site plan where access to the site is provided with 4 new driveways, 2 along North 94th Street, 1 along East Bell Road, and 1 located at the northwest corner of the site from North 91st Street. Surrounding the new 6 fields is desert landscaping along the northern property line, a 50-foot wide desert setback along both street frontages, and the dedication of natural area open space, vista corridor, and drainage easements over protected wash corridors and environmental features. Pedestrian circulation will be provided with an 8-foot wide internal walkway and a 6-foot wide sidewalk along both street frontages. Vehicle parking is provided under the power line easements to the west and off of North 94th Street to the east. Next slide, please. Before you are the maintenance building elevations. Next slide. And the operation. Next slide, please. There you go. And the operation building elevations with materials and colors that are muted desert earth tones. Next slide. Here are the overall material boards, which responds to the Sonoran desert environment. Next slide. I will conclude my presentation with this landscape slide, which shows desert landscaping along the perimeter and internal to the site. That concludes staff's presentation, and the applicant has prepared a presentation as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, board members. This is Croy Ekblaw with the City of Scottsdale. We'll be bringing up another PowerPoint momentarily here, and Lorraine, you can advance that. Just a quick reminder that on this next slide, we are part of the Bond 2019 project. We're focusing on the central or the green one today. There will be future applications on the other sites relating to athletic fields, multi-use fields that will be provided that were approved a little over a year ago as part of that Bond 2019 project. Next slide. We've done extensive public input and feedback on this project, and a lot of focus was on access and traffic and paths and trails, pedestrian access through the site. And we'll have our site plan design team speak to that very briefly here in another moment, but did want to just emphasize, because I know when we were before the board a little over a month ago, there were some questions on, in particular, the access and traffic. And this next slide just highlights that we had Lee Engineering as one of our consulting team members go through, do the traffic collection, data collection and analysis, looked at traffic capacity on the surrounding streets and recognizing the offsite concerns from some of the residents. And this next slide then identifies the things that we've done. And I know one of the questions the last time was on the eastbound left turn lane. Typical lane would be 150 feet in length. We're going with the 200-foot length in order to address the traffic needs, and we do believe that'll be satisfactory. The right turn lane will be a standard length, and then we will, being city, we will continue to evaluate all traffic operations at that location, and if any amendments need to occur, we would be able to proceed with that. 94th Street, we have our access provided without the need of decel lanes, and per public input and recent council approval of municipal use site plan, transportation staff will be reviewing speed limits on 94th Street and monitoring pedestrian crossing interest at Palo Brea and 94th Street, which is north of the park site by several hundred feet. And then 91st Street had no roadway changes required. There was additional discussion at the previous DR meeting on municipal use about the Pima and Trailside intersection. And again, Lee Engineering is working with our transportation department, evaluating that intersection, and we will have an update. The DC Ranch Park, which you've already seen, will be going to the council in January, and we will have an update on that intersection analysis for the council at that time. So we just wanted to remind you of many of the elements that had been questions at your last meeting, and we have worked to address those as we went through the Planning Commission, City Council. The next slide then just reiterates that we've had extensive public input through a couple of open houses and all the public meetings that we've had, and the plans that are now being presented before you represent evolution of those plans. And with that, I'm going to introduce John Barker, who is our landscape architect and site designer on the site. And John's going to take you through the next couple of slides, the site design.
You go back one, please. Thanks, Croy. And members of the board, if you could please go back to that last slide. Thanks. I know Meredith touched on several of these things, so I'll be brief, but just the main features again are the 6 soccer fields, turf fields, the parking, approximately 600 parking spaces. Majority of it is underneath the power line corridor and the small parking lot off of 94th Street. We're preserving the large wash on the east side of the site, which is also designated as the Vista corridor. There's a maintenance yard and maintenance building at the kind of the northwest corner of the site. And then a restroom and staff office space kind of centrally located within the fields. The multi-use fields, the turf fields, are planned to be lighted. And one of the initial concerns from the community was the concern about the lights. And we've mitigated those concerns with the use of the latest LED sports lighting technology. The next slide shows the new technology versus or compared to the old technology. On the bottom, you see a lot of the glare that comes from the light fixtures. And above, you can see the glare is dramatically cut down. So off-site views toward the park will be more like the slide on the photo above. And the other thing about the new technology is behind the fixtures, off the fields, the light levels are dramatically cut down. Next slide. Some of the other comments from the public meeting were providing a sidewalk connection from along 94th Street from the north to down to Bell Road. So that sidewalk is added, along with a lot of sidewalks throughout the site, connecting Bell Road to 91st Street, and then also throughout the site connecting all the fields and a perimeter sidewalk. The perimeter sidewalk goes around a access control fence that surrounds the multi-use fields. It's generally a short 4-foot wire fence. There is some taller fencing along the field number 6, which is the south field, and along the east side of 5 and 6, there's also a 20-foot netting that is positioned to catch any errant balls before they go into the wash area. Next slide. This shows an example of the wire fencing that is proposed, and which is fairly transparent. And then also the netting that would be behind fields 5 and 6, behind the soccer goal. Next slide. That slide was taken at the Scottsdale Sports Complex. That's what's existing today. Next slide. There are approximately 120 native trees that are being salvaged, or that have been salvaged. Some of them are extremely nice, large specimen trees. Over 40 saguaros and about 60 barrel cactuses, all of which will be transplanted back into the complex in the desert landscaping areas around the perimeter. And all of these plantings, the salvaged plus new landscaping, will be irrigated with reclaimed water along with the sports fields. The power line corridor has its constraints, and it along with the wash on the east side have kind of guided the layout of the complex. Parking is a compatible use under the power lines, but unfortunately other like trees and light poles and other structures are limited, or are very limited underneath the power lines. The buildings, the 2 buildings on site, the maintenance yard building and the restroom office space, is just east of the easement, or the power line easement. And the restroom space, I guess we can go to the next slide, kind of zooms in on the restroom. The office space and the restroom are under one roof, but they're separated with a breezeway that goes from the parking lot to a shaded plaza, and then also opens up to the fields for viewing, and also the McDowell Mountains. And with that, I was going to turn it over to our project architect, Steve Pacello, to go in more detail over the buildings.
As John had just mentioned, there are 2 buildings on the site, and this one is the operations building that houses primarily 2 functions: is staff offices and public restrooms. And as John said, about the whole building is under one roof. And the way we've treated this building architecturally is treated it as sort of a gateway into the complex. The staff offices, most of the building is somewhat utilitarian in nature, but we elevated its stature by treating it like a gateway. So there's a central breezeway that you enter through. The staff offices up to the upper part of the plan is in a central location for passive surveillance. It also has additional storage rooms and little service yards that we took a lot of care to incorporate and integrate into the architecture, so they don't appear as afterthoughts. So they're integrated within the roof massing to minimize the review. Most of the building is pretty much experienced on all sides, so we gave a lot of care to how we treat that. Most of the materials are metal for the roof, and some masonry use, and then we have other additional materials that embellish the palette. The building is oriented in a very unique way to parallel some of the site amenities, but also to maximize the view of the fields and McDowell Mountains. Next slide. These are 3 cross sections going through the building to give you a sense of scale beyond just the elevations. The top cross section is through the office area. The middle is through the central breezeway, and the bottom is through the natural ventilated restrooms. In the office area, the way we designed the building, the roof is all about solar orientation and views, as well as complementing the natural desert site surroundings. The top cross-section view to the office area, we gave a lot of care to studying the sun angles. We're using the tree boss sort of surrounding the building as part of our sun shading strategy. And we took care to do sun angle analysis to ensure that the glazing that we're using in that area, not only just we meet energy code requirements, but also becomes well shaded just naturally within the architecture. The central breezeway is designed so that as soon as you enter, it opens up your views. We have a metal soffit area that conceals all fire sprinkler piping and backbone infrastructure, and gave a lot of care to sight lines and visibility to take what would otherwise be an ordinary restroom building and elevate it to make it a nice, pleasant experience within the complex. Next slide. During the material selection, we took materials and studied them out on the site, and these are the 2 primary building materials: integral color masonry with a sandblasted factory finish, and a metal material that's gray that both complements the McDowell Mountains in the background, and those are our primary source of inspiration. The building appears very simple to the site. One of the unique features of the metal is that it not only does it meet the ESL requirements for glare, color, and chroma, but it has a matte finish. So whenever the sun shines on it from any different angles, you don't get visual hotspots on it. Next slide. This is the elevations of the operations building. The bottom is the southwest orientation. So the middle is the northeast view from the park side, and the 2 side views. The building elevations fit within the ESL requirements of 24 feet from natural grade. We also gave a lot of care to considering its context to the DC Ranch area. Simple shed roof, metal standing seam on the roof that then wraps down the walls, and then underneath the building is integral color block, 4 inches high in scale, and other materials that you'll see in our material palette, a metal soffit area that's a lighter gray. Next slide, please. The materials on the right is our sample board, and the digital submittal to your left. A, B, and D is the metal siding. Color H is the exposed structural steel. Color C is the metal soffit underneath the building. And G is the steel doors and louvers that sit within the field of masonry, so it complements very well. The glass that we selected works with our thermal envelope and our energy code compliance. We have integral color concrete that's slated to be used for a raised planter wall. Next slide. And I should say the perforated metal that's indicated on that is for pattern only, not for color. The color of the perforated metal that's high in the elevations is to match the exterior metal skin color. Next slide, please. And finally, the maintenance building sits within a yard surrounded by 8 feet of integral color block that is the same at the building. And the building, half of that building footprint is in an evaporative cooled space. The other half of it is a shaded area. Same exact materials used on the operations building. Next slide, should be the last slide. And as these elevations, same pitch of roof form, same perforated corrugated aluminum that's painted to match the metal to provide enough shade and visual screening within the yard area. The masonry in this is an 8-inch high block, and we work carefully to integrate the architecture of a maintenance building with the main operations building. Thank you.
With that, Councilmember Millhaven, that concludes the staff presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions and respectfully request approval by the Development Review Board of the Bell Road Sports Complex.
Thank you, Mr. Ekbla. Mr. Carr, do we have any public comment?
Councilwoman Millhaven, no, we do not on this one.
Thank you very much. Board members, Commissioner board members, any questions? I don't see any hands raised.
Also,
Oh, there you go. Board Member Gushkari.
Thank you, Councilwoman Millhaven. A compliment to the land use plan. I think this is a great land use plan for the community. I think it's going to benefit the whole region. It's needed and it's going to improve the whole area. So well done. I've got a couple of comments though that I'd like to have either the applicant or the staff address. And that is, I recall about a month ago when this case came before us initially, there were several comments that came from the younger generation, if you will, the younger group of people that asked for potentially to consider to putting what they call the mini pipe or the skating concrete facilities, if you will. And I think that may not be a bad idea. The question I have for staff or the applicant, has that been considered? And if so, what was the outcome? Or if it has not been considered, was there a reason for it not to be considered? When you look at the facility that we have over at the McDowell Mountain Ranch, I noticed the facility in there for the mini pipe or the skating practice is roughly about 100 by 200 feet in dimensions. When I look at the site layout, it appears to me that there is plenty of space to add half an acre or thereabout for that facility. So I'm just curious as to what the outcome of that specific comment. That's the first comment I have. The follow-up comment is regarding the left turn bay into the site off of eastbound traffic for Bear Road. I would assume the vast majority of the traffic will turn left on the parking lot that is the greatest available space, which is on the west side of the field. When you look at the turn bay that is proposed, it's approximately by scale and measure, it's about 150 foot long bay. That seems to be a bit short in my view. We have a lot of traffic when this field is used. I'm not so sure 150 foot stacking bay is adequate to support that load. If it's not considered to be increased, what's going to happen in my view is traffic is going to bypass that turn lane because of the congestion of traffic and will go to the intersection of 94th and Bell and make a U-turn and going westbound again to that parking lot, which is really, really dangerous. So I'm curious as to the restrictions or the obstacles as to why the turn lane stack and bay was not increased to perhaps 300 or 350 foot as opposed to 150. Thank you.
Councilmember Millhaven and Board Member Guskari, this is Croy. I'll start with the last question. We are taking that to 200 feet. That's will be the dimension we propose. We do have Randy Dittburner with Lee Engineering that can speak to that. The standard would have been 150, and their analysis identified a minimum of 175, and we moved that up to 200. And so we can go into that. I do want to just clarify then on your first question, Commissioner Guskari, whether that the reference that you had, there were a number of comments in our early public comments about roller skating opportunities. Was that, am I understanding correctly? Was that what you were asking about?
Yes, as a matter of fact, it is, Mr. Ekblaw. You know, there were many comments in the previous presentation that came from the public regarding that, but it was scattered all over the place. But yes, that is the intent.
Okay, and just to speak to that, this site, it's not to say that we can't evaluate opportunities for roller skating. We do have opportunities for that over at McDowell Mountain Ranch in an existing facility. This site is very limited in its opportunities. The amount of natural open space we have to provide, we're very close to that number. And so we really didn't have an area to offer that on this site. There were certainly then expectations that we could evaluate that depending upon the exact desires of the public as we continue to work on other sites that we can look at that. And so that it was simply deemed not practical for this particular site. With that, would you like further explanation from Lee Engineering on the dimensioning of the Bell Road decel lane?
Well, Mr. Iqbal, I would agree with your notion that there's a constraint, or one of the constraints I looked at in the site plan is actually what you mentioned, the open space and natural area open space specific. So when you look at the intersection of the northwest corner of the intersection of 94th and Bell, there's an opportunity to insert that facility in there at the expense of losing some NAS allocated space. You're right about that. And I figured just rough estimation of my calculation came about, we may lose approximately half an acre of required NAS. Now, the issue really then becomes, this is my own view, one person's view. The question then becomes, is it really appropriate or fair or reasonable perhaps to sacrifice quarter of an acre of NAS of an open space at the interest and the benefit and the gain to nurture our youth and provide something for them to use? To me, the answer would be yes. Now, but then again, that goes at the expense of losing some open space, and I agree with your notion. I personally would think it would be appropriate to at least entertain and evaluate the viability of that option at the expense of losing open space. I'd be interested to see what other board members feel regarding, do we preserve the open space allocation and let go of that opportunity, or do we provide that opportunity for the youth at the expense of losing space? Thank you.
And Councilmember Millhaven and Board Member Gascari, if I could, as noted, this is part of the Bond 2019 program, and very specifically, the funding that we have for this round of improvements was specific to the multi-use fields and all the necessary parking and street improvements, pedestrian improvements to support that. So I think the appropriate thing, we understand your point, but I think the appropriate thing would be that we would need to do a further evaluation of whether it's this site or other sites that we have, and determine if there are needs, to that effect of roller skating or other types of activities similar to that, and then come back with that, both from a funding standpoint and an appropriate site. And we're not opposed to doing that, but that would not, one, it's not part of the bond and was not part of the municipal use approval that we have. And we would have to come back and look at that, and appropriately, that would be another process to do that.
Okay, well, that would be reasonable and acceptable. And as I said, I'm just lobbying for the fact that the youth generation really need to be nurtured, to be provided some facility for them to diffuse their energy and the practice and congregate and stay out of trouble, so to speak. So yeah, I will welcome your suggestion. That's reasonable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, board member. I do not see any other hands raised.
Councilman Millhaven, I do not seem to have a raised hand on my screen, so I am raising my hand. So
Board member Joyner, yes, please proceed.
I don't know where my raised hand sign is, but I think I really admire Mr. Gushkari's comments, but I think we would probably have some homeowners to the northeast up in arms if we start talking about taking away NAOS and open space. So I'm glad that they would have to do a report on that before they could go further with it. Also, I question whether skating, with skating, you have kind of younger demographic, and I'm not sure I would want my little kids skating on Bell Road or close to Bell Road. So, but I would not be in favor of reducing the NAOS in that area. So that's all I have to say. I think the plan looks amazing and I love the lighting. So that's all I have.
Thank you, board member Joyner. And just so you know, if you open the participant list, on the bottom, you'll see a little box that says raise your hand, but you're welcome to speak up. We don't need to be too formal. Any other board members or commissioner have any comments or questions?
I'll respond to that real quick. This is board member Brand.
Thank you.
I'm in agreement with board member Joyner that considering where the project is at, maybe considering other uses for recreational activities would be better considered in future phases of the build out. I had two comments. By the way, I think the project is fantastic. So kudos to all the staff and outside consultants that have worked on it. One comment would be looking at the building elevations, which look great. Just a cautionary about running metal all the way down to the ground. Hopefully that's in areas that's surrounded, that doesn't have foot traffic or adjacent to sidewalks. I was having a little trouble translating back and forth between the elevation and the plan, but I know that running metal all the way down can get kicked and beat up towards the ground. So that's just a advisory note. And the second would be, was there a consideration for, or is there on the plan that we didn't see, any sort of cell phone or device charging stations that are located adjacent to the restroom and office building? I know these events can attract events that, or these fields can attract events that last kind of half day or full day events if they're tournaments or multi-game. And I know that's always constantly something that people are looking for as a place to charge a phone, charge a gaming system if families are there, and sometimes they're all huddled around big light poles that looks a little bit awkward. So I just didn't know if there was a consideration for charging for extended daytime activities, and I'll be quiet here.
Councilmember Millhaven and Board Member Brand, there certainly is power to the site, and the general presumption is the majority of the power provisions are for those who are operating a tournament or things like that, that they would have the ability, whether they're using computers or phones, et cetera, that they have the ability to power. The general public, it's not typical in our parks to provide charging for just general public members. And so that is not provided in that regards, but for those who might be having an event or running a tournament, they would have that ability. Thank you.
Board Member Brand, any additional comment?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Ekbla, I'm not surprised to hear we don't have charging stations in our other parks. They were built, most of them were built pre-cell phone, so that's not the least bit surprising, but might be something to consider moving forward. And then Board Member Gushgari, I like your idea of considering other uses. I think if we look at a skate park, you'll find that a big part, if there's any available space here outside of our NAOS requirements, I think we'd also have a large contingency looking for pickleball courts. So there's it's an interesting thought to think about if there's any additional usable land here, what we might be able to do in terms of community amenities. So thank you for that comment.
I'd vote for the pickleball courts.
See, that's why we need to have more public outreach if we're going to add other uses here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Board Member Joyner. All right, I'm taking a quick look. Any additional comments from the board? If there are none, I'll entertain a motion.
Councilwoman Millhaven, I guess I'm the guy who's
Motion maker man.
the motion maker guy. So this is Board Member Craig making a motion to approve regular agenda item number 6, 38 DR 2020, multi-use sports fields with field lighting.
Thank you, Board Member Craig.
Second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Board Member Joyner. And we'll have a roll call vote.
Okay, Councilwoman Millhaven,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Craig,
Yes.
Board Member Craig, Board Member Joyner,
Yes.
Board Member Gushgari,
Yes.
Board Member Faki,
Yes.
and Board Member Brandt. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all. So it's motion's approved unanimously. We'll move on to regular agenda item 39 DR 2019 Joe Max Storage.
Doris McClay with the Planning Department.
Hi, Doris.
Councilwoman Millhaven, Planning Commissioners, and DRB members. Doris McClay with the Planning Department. Just waiting for my presentation to come up on the screen. Thank you. Doris McClay with the Planning Department presenting the Jomax Storage, case 39DR 2019. This case was continued from the December 3rd Development Review Board meeting. The soils report, as requested by the DRB, has been submitted by the applicant and sent to the Development Review Board members. Next slide, please. The subject property is located on the north side of East Jomax Road. Next slide, please. Here's a close-up view of the subject property. You can see the condominiums on the west side of the site and the single-family homes on the east side of the site. Next slide, please. The zoning on the site is Planned Community Center, Environmentally Sensitive Lands, Hillside District. Next slide, please. This is the proposed site plan for the internalized community storage building. The site plan hasn't changed. It's 1 level above and 3 levels below ground. Next slide, please. Here's the building elevations. The west elevation has been revised and the stone has been changed. It's a new type of stone. Next slide, please. Here's the landscaping plan, which has been revised and shows more salvage trees on the west side of the property. Next slide, please. That concludes staff's presentation. The applicant is here to make a presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, this is Michelle with EAPC. Just checking to make sure I'm
Welcome.
unmuted.
Yes, you are welcome.
Thank you, Councilwoman. So good afternoon, everyone. This is, as Doris mentioned, our continued hearing from December 3rd for the Jomax Internalized Community Storage Project. Next slide, please. To follow up, this is the proposed location on the northeast corner of Alma School and Jomax Road. Next slide, please. And a superimposed aerial image here of our proposed project in between the condominium development to the west and the single family homes to the east. This site plan has not changed from our hearing 2 weeks ago. Next slide, please. The landscape plan here has been revised per comments that we received on the December 3rd hearing, as well as future or follow-up correspondence that we've had with the neighborhood, the Iron Horse community located to the east. So we have updated all of the proposed plans, the proposed trees, the ironwoods and the native mesquites from the 24-inch box to 36. It was initially suggested that we at least look at upsizing the ironwoods. We've gone ahead and upsized all proposed trees on site. We are now also incorporating the native salvage plan with our landscaping plan so that you can see the salvage saguaro cacti on site that are scattered along the east and the west, as well as the 14 mature trees that we're able to salvage on site. From the plan that was in the original development review package sent out last week to the one that you see here today on this slide, there have been some updates to the east elevation based on our outreach with the adjacent neighbors. The original plan showed the 14 salvage trees scattered throughout the site. At the request for the neighbors, we've moved all of the trees to the east side of the development in order to provide better screening from the single family homes to our development. And these trees would range between 12 to 15 feet tall for what they are today for when we can salvage them. One other note I want to make about our neighborhood outreach for the east side was there was a request to also mound the east area of the landscape strip here in order to raise the proposed 6-foot screen wall to a higher elevation due to the homes, the single family homes being about 5 feet taller in finished floor elevation than our development. However, based on the investigation of the area, we could mound the landscape strip an additional 2 feet and not cause any sort of drainage problems on our site. But as soon as we mount the development, we no longer can add the salvaged trees within this area of the site. So our proposal to the board is to keep the elevation at the 2536 that we have proposed and place all of the salvaged trees on the east side, as we feel like the salvaged trees will offer more beneficial screening than new proposed trees for the extra 2 feet of mounding. Next slide, please. The next several slides just go through each elevation from what was presented on December 3rd to what is being presented today to the board. We, as Doris has mentioned, have updated the stone material to be blended stone veneer that takes the blend of colors from our proposed stucco and metal screening, as well as being darker to kind of blend in with the natural landscape. So this is the south elevation facing Jomax Road. Next slide, please. This is the east elevation, which faces the single family homes. Again, the only change on this slide has been the stone veneer. Next slide, please. The north elevation has stayed largely the same. This elevation does face most of our functional properties with the fire and trash enclosure turnaround and an extra loading area for our building, which just has a minor paint transition on it. Next slide, please. And the west elevation was discussed in our last hearing on December 3rd to blend the west elevation in to be more cohesive with the other 4 sides. So we have changed the color palette paint layout slightly, as well as refined the stone veneer locations. Next slide, please. And this is the material board, which is the same one that was presented on December 3rd, with the exception of the stone veneer that has been changed from the beige limestone to this blended ledge stone. Next slide, please. These are some updated perspective drawings, again showing on the south side we have a 3-foot parking screen wall adjacent to our internal drive, with the south portion of it being open landscaping and preserved NIOS area. And this, that's okay, next slide, please. Then as well, this is also our south elevation facing Jomax Road as you enter the facility. Next slide, please. These next 2 slides were additional exhibits requested by the board, as well as the adjacent homeowners, to start looking at a line of sight from an elevation perspective of where our building sits and where the adjacent single family home residents sit. So we have measured this out based on our building location, our parking, then our driveway space, the landscaping buffer we're providing, plus the landscaping buffer that exists today on the single family homes property, the 110th place driveway, and then the single family homes driveways and their home. We've done a few different line of sight angles, one showing if individual, which we have just used an average height of about 5.5 feet from somebody's line of sight. If they were standing on their driveway looking directly at our building, where we would be proposing to keep the 12 to 14 foot tall mature trees all located on our side of the property, as well as trees that exist today on the Iron Horse Community single family home property and the ground cover. I do know from recent conversations with the homeowners that there have been additional trees within the last couple of years also added along this strip. So I've tried to emulate those as much as possible. There might be some areas that are missing on the neighborhood side, but our side of the wall would be an entire screen of the mature trees. With the elevation change and our building height being primarily in the 17 foot with a couple transitions to 18 feet on the east elevation, we would be able to provide almost an entire screening of the east elevation. With the higher angle from the neighbors, they would be looking at the tops of our trees, only being able to see the very top few feet of our building, and then any sort of slight angle that somebody may be looking up at the mountains to the west or into the sky would go directly over our building. And the different angles that I have depicted on this exhibit are a 5, 10, and 15 degree angle, which are pretty natural angles for somebody just lifting their chin up slightly to look into the sky. Next slide, please. This is the same type of exhibit that we did from the west side. It was a little bit more difficult to get the exact dimensions to the condos because the condos do all rotate and sit at different locations. So through our investigation, the primary building, which I am titling B here, and I know it's not the label of the building on site, I think it's actually O after talking to the HOA of the condo development, but we primarily wanted to focus on the distance between the condo development and our west elevation, which is well into the 130 feet of space. I've included these images on the top of this slide to show the development review board that this is the area of the wash that will be maintained and untouched for the existing shrubs and trees and cacti in this area. And then in addition, with the extra 20 feet, approximately 20 feet from our property line to our closest corner of our building, and then it just grows, that 20 feet grows with our building steps on the west side, but we will be adding additional shrubs and trees along that west side to help screen. And again, with the angles that the condo development sits at, the building B that I have depicted on this drawing is the most impacted, and if someone were sitting on their second story balcony, would again look directly out at just the top couple feet of our elevation due to them actually sitting lower, roughly 5 feet or lower on their property than our property, that their second story kind of acts in the same way as the single story on the opposite side acts for the east. Next slide, please. This further depicts the distances between the condo development and our proposed project, as well as on the east side, the single family homes. And for the condo development, as I was mentioning on the last slide, where you can see building B looks diagonally straight at our west elevation. Building C, based on its orientation, there's only one corner in kind of the northeast corner of that building that really kind of skims the southwest corner of our property. And then to the north, where I've depicted building A, they really look straight out into all of the preserved natural open space that we're providing, as well as the wash area that separates our development from the condo development. And then on the east side of our property, we have included the extra landscaping space that will be filled with our proposed landscaping and salvage material, as well as the extensive setback that exists on the single family home site before you hit the 110th place, which is approximately 100 feet of open space if you include the landscaping and the drive, 110th place drive, till you reach the single family homes. Next slide, please. And then this is our final slide. I wanted to bring this up to the review board of additional conversations and questions that have been posed to us from the single family home residents of our mechanical equipment and our roof plan. I know that was an extra exhibit that was actually requested by the board. So this is our roof plan, which we are preliminarily working on right now, showing 7 RTUs and 18 split heat pumps. These units have been reflected on our new elevation, showing their proper locations. The elevations presented in the December 3rd hearing were proposed temporary locations of generic sized units. These have now been updated. The elevations also do show that all of the rooftop units are properly screened, and any that are not screened by the physical building parapet, we will be adding an additional metal louver screen around the unit, which actually only affects 2 units on the west side. From the east development, with our architectural features on the building, they do screen all of our units as well as the elevator shaft. Additionally, there's been some concern about the noise output from the mechanical units. So we have estimated the average noise level of the units, which happen at their point of location. With our additional screening and the distance between our unit and our adjacent neighbors on the east and west, these levels will be drastically reduced by the time they reach our property line. So there shouldn't be any adverse noise. And then lastly, as a follow-up to the provided geotechnical report, it was determined that even with our extra depth for the 3rd basement level, that no additional hard rock or dig is going to be needed. It was the same medium loose soil that we had in our previous borings several years ago. So just a standard excavation dig is what we are moving forward with. Next slide. So thank you very much for your time and consideration on our project, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. We'll see. Mr. Carr, do we have any public comment on this item?
Councilwoman Millhaven, we did have somebody that had submitted to do that, and unfortunately, it looks like they dropped out of the call. So unless they return back to the call, we don't have anybody at this time.
Thank you very much. Board members, any questions? Board Member Joyner.
You knew I'd have questions. To the applicant, I specifically in the last meeting asked for a drawing, a rendering of what that roof was going to look like from those condos. A mechanical drawing is not what I was asking for, and I think I made that fairly clear. And nobody sits on their patio and only looks straight. I was there again today and I was looking, and there's far more condos involved than just the 3 or 4 that are being shown on the drawings. But why wasn't a rendering shown of what that roof is going to look like from the the balconies of the condos.
So Board Member Joyner, I do recall your comment, and after going through our exhibit, that's what we had tried to show with our line of sight from the 3 condo buildings involved to our east elevation, as well as showing on our elevation drawings that the units will be screened. And as far as the line of sight, I agree with you that no one just sits on their patio or walks out their front door and looks straight ahead, which is why there are, especially from the east side, we have shown that even at the slightest angle, people will look directly over a building. This was the exact same investigation we found from the west development, from the condos, that even at the smallest 5-degree to 10-degree angle, people will end up looking directly over our facilities. So with our additional screening and line of sight exhibit showing the landscaping, I guess maybe if there's an additional exhibit or rendering needed from there, that we'd be happy to follow up on that.
Okay, I have a follow-up question on the flood, on the soil plan. This floodplain that goes along the west side of the property, if you followed it about 500 yards north, you'd be in my backyard. And I can tell you that this year we had water running across our floodplain for over 3 months. And there were 4 places in the write-up that said that I identified that the drilling was done on dry dirt, which we know we haven't had rain since March, and that if it had been wet, their findings might have been different. And that is a concern to me, because I can tell you literally water was running on our property in our floodplain for 3 months this year. So does that have any impact on the 3 stories below grade that you're going to be building if it was wet?
Currently, no. Our 3 stories below grade will be fully waterproof membraned walls to make sure that we don't have any potential flooding on the interior of our building. And as far as the outside ground level goes, I know that our civil engineer has been working closely with the City of Scottsdale engineering department. They have done extensive plans and investigations, as well as a preliminary grading and drainage report and water report, to make sure that our development, even with the 3 basements, does not create any additional adverse effects with flooding throughout the wash or on our property.
Okay. Well, I guess I just have a few comments then. I'm very disappointed that the drawing of the roof wasn't included, because that can't help but make a difference to maybe board members that would be voting on this that haven't been on the property. I did have 2 realtors contact me that are very active in both of those neighborhoods. And one agent actually told me that they are having difficulty selling one of the condos because of this property going in. So this building is going to definitely have an impact on the value of both the houses and the condos. I didn't hear anything more about the traffic concerns at Jomax. We talked about that quite a bit at the last meeting. Again, I was there today, and there's already problems there. We've got the 4 Seasons, we've got traffic coming out on Jomax, north and south on Alma School, and that is a blind corner. So hopefully, if this goes forward, by the time it gets to City Council, that concern will definitely be addressed. I guess that's my comments. So thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Joyner. And I just want to follow up on the roof question. So as a novice, my understanding is what you're saying is given the relative elevations of the buildings, no one would be looking down on top of the roof. Is that a fair interpretation of what you're saying?
That would
Yes,
not be,
that is correct.
that I don't believe that would be true.
Okay, I just wanted to understand what the applicant was asserting. Thank you.
Right. And I think before anybody at city council votes on it, they need to go sit on that property.
Yeah, and Mr. Carr, I don't believe this will come before council, will it?
No, it will not. The DRB is the final decision on the design.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Carr. Okay, Board Member Craig, I think your hand was up next.
Thank you, Councilwoman Milhaven. And for the applicant, I see on the landscape plan that was sent more recently that you have some overhead electric lines that appear to be going to be placed underground along the east property line. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct, along the length of our property boundary.
Yeah, with that, and I know that, and thank you for the updated landscape plan and the enhancement of the landscape buffer along that east side. All those trees that are going to be installed there will be large boxed trees. If they're probably at least a 48 to 56, perhaps a 72-inch box, and that electrical line will be, it's shown measured between 3.5 to 5 or maybe 10 feet from that line. Has there been any type of confirmation from the utility company that those trees and the electrical line will not cause any conflict?
There has not been at this time, but that is something that we will continue to work through to make sure that all of our proposed landscaping will not cause a conflict with the underground utilities. And I do know in conjunction to that, there have been some comments from the adjacent neighbors with this proposed undergrounding, because just to the north end of our property, the lines would stay above ground, as well as the lines that are along Jomax, and how the utility company plans on tying those in. So there are some continued coordination that we need to have with the utility company on their surrounding lines.
Okay, so you still intend to use the box trees and bury the lines?
We do at this time, yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And I have no further questions.
I'm sorry, Board Member Craig, did you have more questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. Board Member Brand.
Excuse me. Thank you, Councilwoman Milhaven. Sorry, I have a few questions here, and I apologize if me being new to the board and this is a continued case, I may be digging up comments that may have been mentioned last time. First of all, I have a question about why, for a facility that is going 3 levels below grade with 75% of the building being developed below grade, why there wasn't a site section or a section of the building that was shown in conjunction with the adjacent grades. I didn't see that in any of the application materials. But for something with majority of it below grade from a just straight development proposal, it would have been nice to have seen some sort of drawing that indicated what was being done on site other than just what is seen from grade. So there's a lot of things that happen below grade. So I'm just curious why that didn't happen. And even I know that in a lot of cases, a site transition section type of drawing is mandated. And this just seems like the exact type of project that you would have that we're in a hillside district. You've got grade change and you've got a facility that has 75% of its area below grade, including 3 levels below grade adjacent to a wash. It seems like a pretty simple drawing to make that would really illustrate the project, and it's absent. Is there staff? Is there something that was missing, or has that been shown it just wasn't included, or is that not something that was never developed? Well, that's just question number one. I don't know if I should move on with but I'd love to see.
Oh, yeah, Board Member Brand, would staff like to answer that question?
Yeah, we can, Councilman Millhaven, we can certainly answer that question. I think there may have been something that was submitted here on the civil plan side that showed some sections through the building. Maybe it didn't make it into your packets, and I apologize for that. We do have some different drawings, I think, that show kind of at a basic level how the building is going to function with a section through it and some retaining walls, but it doesn't give, they don't give much detail as to I guess grading overall up against the building or in a very detailed manner. They're just a very basic section through the entire site.
Right.
And I don't know if that's what you were referring to.
Well, I just think that, and it's referring to the applicant as well. If you're fielding comments about visual impact to neighbors, a section drawing is much more descriptive, especially if there's parapet walls and mechanical screens, than putting an elevation on there, because that's not really a cut through of the building. So I would, just from a critical standpoint, I think that's a crucial drawing to be able to see and read the visual impact from neighboring properties. So a couple things. I also noticed I didn't see in the architectural plans just a site plan. I actually didn't see the below grade plan in conjunction with the site section. A couple other things. I noticed that shadows were not on the elevations, and we didn't have any elevations that indicated shadowing, which I think is important for us to be able to read depth of materials and the building itself. So that's another question for the applicant. I think I wanted to understand the perforated metal material, and it's being shown on the elevations, and it's shown on the material board. How is that material in sheets? Is it in panels? Is there something behind it? And how is it, or is it just a screen that's got, like, I see the finished material, but I don't know what that's actually going to look like, because you can't just have perforated metal as a wall material. It has to have something behind it, and how it's applied. So there's that with the material. I have questions about, if you're going 3 levels below grade, what your shoring strategy is, since you're, in some cases, you're less than 5 feet or right at 5 feet from 3 levels below grade from NAOS area, and how your shoring strategy is going to be able to allow you to excavate and not disturb natural area open space, because your proximity is directly adjacent to it. And then lastly, I was going to suggest that from mechanical screening, you've got a bump up in the roof. There's 2 roof levels that I would think the backside of those mechanical units, as viewed from the west, would require an extension of the parapet wall along the bump up of the roof as mechanical screening. I don't think that just perforated metal or that some sort of metal screening would be appropriate here. I would think that it would be an extension of the wall as a massing of the building that would extend along the roof line, where you've got a bump up in the roof structure. So I'll just kind of wait for some, I know that's a lot of items. If you want to respond one by one, or I can reiterate those.
Sure. Thank you, Board Member Brad. I'll go one by one. I did write them down. If I forget one, just please remind me. In relation to the site section of the building and grades, Brad Carr is correct. There were some preliminary sections through the land provided on our civil plan package. I don't think that is shared in the development review board packages. I could be wrong, but they might have been shared in the original set. They are very just simple line drawings that show the NLS boundary, our excavation for the basement area, and then some elevation points. So we haven't created full building site sections, those will be coming, that will be part of our building plan set where we have full sections through all levels of our building once we get to that review period with the city. For the perforated screen location, it is only located around the main office area in the south east corner of the building. So behind it is an 8-inch block stucco wall that is painted the gray material just to adjacent on both sides of the metal screening. And then the perforation metal is anchored to the wall to create that extra elevation depth to the screen. And they have, yes, that is on the screen right now. Those are the very preliminary cut through drawings from our civil set.
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to. Excuse me. The civil, these type of civil sections are for figuring out specific civil functions from a grading and drainage standpoint. But this does not, and also these are not to the same scale horizontally and vertically as you would a real life kind of site section. So these aren't very descriptive of what I was imagining. So continue on. Sorry.
Yeah, and from our packets, that the site section that you are asking for, it's just simply not something that we've been asked to be provided by staff. So that's one reason. In the design process, we haven't added it versus the full building sections that we will be providing in our building plan set. So for the metal screening, that was our location on that. For the shadows on the elevations, they are shown. We do have shadows shown on the colored elevations that were provided. I don't know if they're just kind of hard to see in some areas, but they are provided, and primarily you see them on the north elevation. From the west elevation, due to the angle that we took them on, the building sets at a different location. So
I apologize. I was looking at the west elevation primarily when I was looking at that from the materials. So I do see it on the other elevations. I apologize for that.
That's okay. For the shoring strategy, we are in very preliminary design since we haven't finished our building construction set yet, and sheeting and shoring is something that we continuously work through as we start to look at the constructability plans of the project and working with a general contractor. So preliminarily, we have been discussing using soil nails to help shore the ground around on all four sides of the property. And we would primarily have to come from the east side because you are correct, we are very close to the NAOS area on the west. So most of our sheeting and shoring would have to come from the other three sides of our property. And then the roof line on the west. So the west elevation roof slopes at a smaller building height than the east due to the natural grade. Because we are in an ESL overlay district, we are only allowed to have our building 24 feet tall from the current natural grade level. So because of that, in certain areas of our building, we've had to lower the parapet in order to stay within that natural grade building height limitation, which puts the southwest corner of our building at the most impacted area. That's also the area where you see a couple of the mechanical units, about half of the height of that unit, peeking over the building parapet wall. So we will be adding an additional metal screening on the roof that blends in with the building itself in order to conceal those units from the adjacent neighbors. But as far as the actual building parapet height, that would be something, if you did want us to raise, we would have to work through city staff, because currently that would be out of code compliance for the building. And let me know if I missed any other questions.
Well, I'll go back to the roof question, because I do think, in response to board member Joyner's comments, that I actually think I appreciate the low level nature of what you guys are doing here. I think that the 24-foot height limit is something that's available in that area, and capping what you guys are doing at 18 feet and with some really low roofs. I do think that the visual impact of the actual building and the structure that's being created has been pretty well mitigated. But I do have some concerns because of the condos that are to the west that are slightly elevated, that there are some, I think there should be careful effort that if you've got multiple roof levels, again, that you have adequate screening on all four sides of your mechanical equipment. And just because an elevation, a section of the building extends, a section of the roof extends further west, that doesn't mean that the view across that roof structure is going to be shielded. So you do have units that, I think the backside of those units don't have a parapet wall adjacent to them that's high enough to fully screen them. So I would be careful about that. Thank you for the clarity on the perforated metal. It's only at the entry. It looks like the other pieces of the elevation are metal panel. Is that correct?
Correct. They're a solid metal panel.
Is that a horizontal, vertical? Is it panelized? What type of material is that? It just says metal panel.
So they're horizontal on the solid panel sections with like a small ribbed panel. It's not corrugated, but it's like a small ribbed panel on it, about a foot tall, each ribbed panel. And then they come in various lengths, how we make them. In this particular project, we're looking to make them fairly long sections. So probably like a 6 to 8 foot section of that panel. And then on the perforated section, those will be running the opposite direction. The physical panel gets mounted in a vertical, but it's perforated with small circular holes. So that visual line is going to dissipate based on the pattern in the perforation.
Okay, thank you. And one other suggestion maybe is that it seems like the question or the neighborhood input about adding the screen wall on the east side of the property, with the current layout of the grades in that area, it seems like that screen wall is fairly unimpactful as far as improving any views. Has there been any discussion with the neighborhood about providing a wall that is on the neighborhood property, and that you guys would provide an in lieu some sort of funding for a wall that would be more effective in a higher elevation? Or is that something that has any discussion been had with that?
On the neighborhood's property, no. The only discussion was if we could raise the 6 foot wall that's on our property by mounding the land. And we could do that, but as I had mentioned, if we mound that area, it's only going to raise the area 2 feet. So based on the elevation change, from the neighbor's perspective, it's only going to look like a small seat wall. So we felt it was more beneficial to keep the salvageable trees along the east side in order to provide that screening for the neighbors, because if we mound the area, then we can no longer keep the salvaged trees in that location. It's never been a request to put a wall on the neighbor's property, and I don't believe that's something that we would like to entertain. because we don't own that land. And we also feel like adding the landscaping is a more natural way to screen our building than an extra wall.
I would agree with that, and I think that the trees over time will provide a much better screening opportunity than the wall will. I just see the wall there, it's money being spent, and its location makes it completely benign to its actual intended function, which would be to screen, and it just doesn't function that way. So seems like it would be in everyone's best interest for that, if it was to be built at a location where it actually functioned in some way that it was intended to function to screen something. So it's just a comment, and I know that some developers have worked with private neighborhoods and residences, not to actually build something on their property, but to essentially provide the ability to help fund something that may visually mitigate the impactment of their project. So that is something that's been done. It takes negotiation, but it's something that is a good gesture towards neighbors that are visually impacted. I would suggest reaching out and possibly trying to coordinate that, although it's completely out of the realm of of this board right now. Anyway, I'll turn this back over. Thank you for answering the questions. I'll turn this back over for additional questions.
Thank you. And Board Member Brandon, your comments, you thought that one of the things I took away was you thought that the roof screening was inadequate. What would you think would make it adequate?
I think in most cases, the continuing of mass, I think what compounds that is that you have pieces of the building on the facade, both on the east face and west face, that bump up to immediately screen units that are directly behind them. But the parapet wall does not extend onto the roof. It's only in line with the facade of the building. And if you were to extend those parapet walls on the roof, this is something in addition to what I was talking about before, that would help screen those units, as well as where the roof drops from, I'm not sure the exact elevations, but there's a drop as the building goes from east to west, that at that drop moment that that screening is provided as an extension of the wall coming down from the north. Hard to describe without marking up a drawing, but essentially having a mechanical screen wall that looks like it's an extension of the building elevation extending across the roof.
Could that be done without exceeding the 24-foot limit that was mentioned?
I'm assuming that it could, because it would be an extension of the wall that's directly north of it. So I'm assuming that it would be in line with that. I'm going to go back through the package that I have right now.
Is this, maybe the applicant could respond also, is this something you might be agreeable to?
So we're agreeable to extra screening. However, if it's part of the physical building wall, like if it's raising that building wall or the element that is attached to that parapet wall, such as what we are showing on the east elevation versus the west, that does exceed the 24-foot and it's not allowed. So an actual screen wall, extra screening that's mounted on the physical roof surface to conceal the units, that is allowed because that's part of the City of Scottsdale design ordinance to fully screen any mechanical equipment, whether it be by the building parapets or an additional screening located on the roof. So that's why on the west elevation, there are some really low building walls, and why we are intending to add that extra roof screening around the unit. All four other sides of the property do have screening around them, but the west elevation would need some extra screening added to it. So if there was a request to raise the physical building wall or to add a taller screening attached to the wall, like we're showing here on the east elevation, that would be something we would have to work through with staff because it would exceed what the ordinance allows.
So what you're saying is you could, Board Member Brand, so it sounds like they can't raise the parapet, but they can add more screening.
Correct. We are adding screening that's on the roof itself.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's what I was suggesting doing is that you may need more than what you're showing right now. Can we go back to the roof plan? I'm not sure which.
It's the last slide. So, and this roof plan does not show the metal screening, but it would be the west half. There's a ridge line going from north to south on that straight line. So it would be the units, the small heat pumps, as well as the one RTU unit that would have the extra screening wrapped around them.
So we're talking about essentially the two most western units on this plan, which are, towards the south, just east of the ridge, and the one just west of the ridge on the L-shaped leg that pushes to the west. Are those the two units that you're talking about?
Yes, they're both on the west side of the ridge, but yes, they would. Those are the ones that we're putting extra screening around because the parapet is too low to fully screen it.
And the parapet is low because of the grade change in the adjacent natural grade, with coordination with the allowable parapet height, building height.
That's correct, because our building elevation for the first floor is sitting at 2536, but in this corner, the natural grade is 2528, and so we have to take that number, add 24 feet to it with our proposed grade and our building height, and that puts us at our limit of only making that elevation 14 feet tall, whereas several other places throughout our building were in the 15 to 18 foot range. So it provides that adequate screening.
Would it be possible to move that unit to the east and just route the trunk line below the ceiling or below the roof structure? Because it seems like as you move that unit further east, then your ability to screen it increases as you go east. I'd hate to see a unit. I'd hate to see what doesn't look good is a unit sitting up there with some what looks like temporary just metal screening sitting on the roof. That almost looks just as bad as a unit itself. I think the intent of everything that's built in Scottsdale is to have the parapet wall or things that appear to be building elements and designed as a facade element to act as screening. And if there's something on the roof that has to sit on the roof surface itself, it needs to have the appearance of a design feature or an element that's at one with the building facade materials too. So having something that appears to just be mechanical screening, I don't think is a good solution for this. And it's also not shown.
We can, so we can certainly show or look into whether we can relocate that unit. That's a bit out of my realm to answer right now. I'd have to consult our mechanical engineer to see if there's a way that we can shift that unit further to the east and potentially a little bit to the north in order to use the building parapet walls as screening and reduce the need for additional metal screening on the roof.
Thank you. Board Member Brand, anything else?
No, nothing else.
Thank you very much. Board Member Faki.
Thank you. I have a question first for staff actually. And when it comes to the NUS requirement, it seems like there is some dedication happening on the west side and the north side. And it seems like we are within like 15 square feet of the requirement. So when I look at between the required and the proposed, we're within 15 square feet. And isn't NUS usually a minimum 30 feet dedication, I guess? Because I'm looking at this shape on the north side and the west side, and I don't see any like minimum width to it or any average 30 feet. But can you elaborate a little bit about those dedication?
Councilwoman Millhaven and Board Member Faki. So there is going to be a release and rededication of NAOS on this site. And then when they do that release and rededication, they have to show that they're meeting the NAOS requirements of the 30 feet width, but it can be combined with other adjacent NAOS. So we'll have to evaluate to make sure that NAOS meets the city's requirements when they do that release and rededication, and that the amounts stay the same. So we will do that at the final plans to make sure that it meets the requirements.
Fair enough. And they show some calculation for open space, but there is no requirement for open space on this zoning, right? It's mainly NUS requirement, correct?
Councilwoman Millhaven and Board Member Faki, there is an open space requirement, but NAOS can also be used for that open space. I think they are showing open space that's not NAOS, but they also have the NAOS on top of that. So they're exceeding their open space requirement.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So when I look at this application, and I think, like I echo Board Member Brand, what he mentioned about they did a good job on how to fit it. However, when you start looking into detail on the site plan, I mean, there is a lot of item that's questionable as far as constructability for the project. So first, I would like to start with the site plan. I'm looking at this. I mean, I'm assuming, this storage unit will be used for some U-Haul, people moving, people bringing stuff in. And I do see the radiuses. I'm not sure if those are the City of Scottsdale Fire Department requirement, but I'm really wondering how a truck would come in and make those two sharp 90-degree. I'm not sure if you guys have any truck route. I know you show your circulation radiuses, but there is no spacing between the one that coming in and the one that keep going north on the side. I just find it really tough to see how this truck is maneuvering, because you're going from 24 feet width to 28. And I'm not sure, have you guys looked at this? Is there any truck route been done for like a U-Haul or any of those truck to come into the property?
I'm sorry, is that a question that you would like me, the applicant, to answer?
Yes.
I wasn't sure if you were directing that towards staff. So yes, we are showing truck turn radiuses through our site. These radiuses do meet emergency vehicle standards, as well as the largest U-Haul truck standard. And in the north end of our property, we do have a loading space designated for moving vehicles, as well as a turnaround for refuse and fire emergency. So we have looked at that, as well as staff has reviewed this plan to meet those standards. And actually, over the course of our development, that north end turnaround has changed based on comments that we've worked through with city staff, fire, and transportation.
So if you don't mind, show the site plan on the screen. So this outer, I guess, radius you show on the driveway, what's those dimension, I guess?
So the driveway as you come in is 30 feet wide. And as you make the turn along the south elevation, it does transition to a shorter 24-foot wide driveway during the straightaway, but then widens back up again as you make the curve to go north to a 20-foot and then opening up to a 36-foot drive on the end, where we have a large radius to get into the loading area from the 20-foot drive into the loading bay that's 40 feet by 25 feet, as well as the radius hammer head. So those are 35-foot radiuses in that whole north end of the property.
Understood, but I'm talking about the entrance. You had one drawing, I think your site plan shows a fire truck circulation on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so on this PowerPoint application, the only site plan, because I know you keep flipping through it, is the aerial show that has the site plan embedded in it, but the site plan was a part of the actual packet application. So I don't have those radiuses called out. That is something I can provide staff to follow up with you, but I do know the fire truck radius was planned at an outer radius of 55 feet, and the curb is even wider than that, just past it for the entryway.
Okay. I'm sure staff will work with you on this piece of it. The other item I have, and I think Jeff mentioned earlier, I mean, you're literally kind of like building next to an AUS. You're going down 32 feet based on your section. You're removing dirt about 36 feet. And I know you mentioned nails. Nails doesn't work here. You have wash just west of here. And I'm looking at, I mean, the shoring of this project is going to be extremely difficult and expensive. I mean, overly expensive. And then you will be removing, just by quick calcs here, you're removing about 30,000 yards of dirt. This is almost like $500,000 just removing dirt without even starting. So have you guys looked at, I mean, those methods closely? Because I mean, the site looked really tight. And when I start looking at, okay, how does this fit the surrounding? How is, I mean, is it something we'll be able to go forward with when it comes to construction? And is it, we are within 15 square feet of NUS. So what does this mean? If someone literally just drop one shoring, or you have one slope that it end up not being stabilized with your shoring, you don't meet the NUS requirement. So, I mean, I'm trying to understand how you will be able to build this and still meet the NUS requirement, undisturbed NUS requirement on your west side of the building. I mean, did you guys look into it? Do you have, I mean, more detail on the construction need to meet the NUS requirement?
So we do know that we have to maintain the NOS, and that for our construction, we have to stay out of that, which is why we will be working from the east to develop the west side of our property, because we're at such limited space with really only about 5 feet in the southwest corner of our property before we hit the NOS protective line. But as far as our sheeting and shoring plans go, those are currently under discussion with our construction and development team. We don't have those plans done, not even near done, just getting through this design review process. But it is on our mind of things that we're starting to investigate for further detailed plans. And this has been, we do know the cost of the dig, the depth that we were going in, and the footprint of our property. Those have all been factors that the developer has considered for the financial cost of it, and is still planning on moving forward with it. We have full intention to continue moving past DR and developing our construction plan set, working with the city of Scottsdale to make sure all the standards are met with no disturbance to surrounding land, and then moving directly into construction of the property.
And you know, and this is where I have issue, because this is a DRB application. You're about 40% to 50% design, and especially when it comes to NUS and grading. I mean, you're getting approved here, if you get approved tonight or today, within 15 square feet. And I'm really having a hard time to figure out how you guys are going to keep, I mean, will be able to do so. I mean, I've been involved in shoring project before. I look at this one here, and I really would like to see more detail. I mean, to commit to this NUS, I think we need to have more information on how you guys are going to meet it. I mean, the section that I reviewed that Brett sent to me on the civil plan, it's very vague to even mention, what's going on at the basement level. I mean, it doesn't even showing your foundation, your footing, your shoring. I mean, there is a lot of detail that at 40% in my mind should be here. That because this will affect your site plan, it will affect your building placement, it will affect the viability of this project that I think we don't have before us, or at least I mean, this is again, one person on the board here, but I truly believe there should be more investigation on the construction, especially on the west side. I think you guys done a great job on the roof part of it. I mean, the height, how you step it, but at the same time, when it comes to the site layout, I have major concern with NUS. The other part of it, on this piece of the wash, and I'm not sure, I don't see it on the site plan, but isn't this a Vista corridor right now? Isn't the whole west side a Vista corridor? Because of the wash, I mean, it has 1,100 cubic feet on it. So I'm assuming it's a major Vista corridor on the west, isn't it?
Councilwoman Millhaven and Board Member Faki, yes, I believe it is a Vista corridor wash.
Okay, so I don't see any dedication on, or maybe it is actually, it's a new dedication that they're doing on their side of the property, correct?
Yeah, and the wash is already dedicated as NAOS and a Vista corridor, and that the wash, most of the wash is on the condominium property. Board Member Faki.
Okay, fair enough. And I see the Vista corridor going in a little bit into this revegetated, I guess, NUS. Okay. The other question, I guess, and I think Jeff mentioned majority of the other item I have. Yeah, I think that's it for me. It's mainly circulation and how this constructability and keeping this NUS based on the site plan, based on what the show site plan. Those are my main concern, unless I have some document that shows the viability of this means of construction, I guess, or how this project will be built. And we still here sitting and we know that we approve something that will be able to meet the NUS. I think this one of my major concerns. So thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Faki. Board Member Gushgari.
Councilwoman Millhaven, I want to circle back really quickly to the building height elevation. Not that we haven't spent enough time on it, but if you look at the attachment number 17 of the package, it basically says the proposed development proposes a maximum height of 24 feet exclusive of top appurtenances. But when you look at the exhibit that is before us, it shows that basically the maximum height is 18 feet. I assume the 18 feet is off of the proposed finished grade, not the existing finished grade. Is that a fair statement?
That's correct. The 24-foot building height limitation is from natural grade. And so to meet that number from our finished grade elevation, our max height's really 18 feet.
So what would the total height be when you include all the top appurtenances?
They all stay within the 18 or less height. The couple units that are in question on the west side are at roughly the 15.5, 16-foot height limitation.
But as you base it off of the existing ground, the lowest existing ground, what would the total height be?
That's what I'm saying. So it's about 16 feet from that lowest ground, but the parapet height in the lowest ground is only 14, based on the limitation of the natural grade in that area. So we have a couple feet of those units that peak above the building parapet that we're allowed to have.
So what we're saying in different words, including the top roof appurtenances, it will not exceed 24 feet from the lowest finished ground, existing finished ground. Is that correct?
Correct.
I'm sorry, did you say yes?
Yeah, so
okay.
the building itself doesn't exceed the height limitation, but the units do from the natural ground. But they are still less than the 18 feet that's allowed on certain other areas. It's a large math equation based on all the different natural grades around the property, and what areas of the building we're allowed to add more height than others, and how does that affect the units that are exposed or hidden on the roof. So from a natural grade level, those units from our finished grade to the rough top units is about 16 feet. And then from a natural grade level, the units would be about 2 feet above. So they would be more at like a 26-foot number. And that's why we can't extend the building wall up that way.
So that's, thank you for the explanation. That's the point I was trying to get to. And that is, when you consider the top roof appurtenances, we're going to be above the 24 limitation, which is per code. But the question becomes to staff at this point in time, what is the maximum height of the top roof appurtenances that is allowed above and beyond 24? Is it 2 foot? Is it 1.5? Is it 6 feet? What is the maximum allotment of that height? That's a question to staff.
Councilwoman Millhaven, this is Doris McClay, and Board Member Gushari. So it's the mechanical, can go above the natural grade height. I don't think we have a specific height, but we want to keep them as low as possible. And most of the times it's still below that natural grade of 24 because of the location on the roof where the units are located. That south west corner is the lowest natural grade topo on the property.
Thank you for that explanation. I've got a couple of concerns, basically. First of all, before I get to the concern, I really want to acknowledge the hard effort and the work that the applicant has put forth to trying to make this site a little bit more conducive to the environment. I really appreciate that, and it's evident. Although, one question that I have is the signage at the south elevation. I made the comment on the December 3rd meeting that I don't believe that signage is appropriate for that neighborhood. Had the site be fronting, for example, Elm School Road, it'll be a different story. But whereas if they're actually abutting adjoining property that are all residential, that signage of that magnitude and size does not seem to fit in that environment. And a lower sign, probably closer to the ground level, is more appropriate. I still have the same feeling today as I did 2 weeks ago. And the west elevation also, I think the applicant has done a very nice accent with the stones. The accent really broke the massiveness, if you will, of the horizontal look, but not the vertical look. When you look at the vertical look up and down on the west elevation, it seems to still have to have a mass image. It reminds me of a back side of a Target store or perhaps a Walmart store. I think it needs to be softened a little bit. I'm not so sure how, probably some sort of an eyebrow or some sort of a canopies or something of that sort to kind of break the mass of the vertical elevations. I also made a comment back in December 3rd about what if the applicant was unable to provide all the requested data by the board within 2 weeks. The reason I made that comment back then is the fact that I thought the information that was requested by the board back in December 3rd was onerous and a lot to be accomplished in within 2 week period. And this whole discussion that we've had in the last 60 minutes proved to the point that the package as submitted today is incomplete. I'm not so sure I'm in a position today to actually support this case as presented, much like what previously made comment by the previous board members. It's incomplete. It needs a lot more information because this board is the ultimate decision to make this project approved or denied. It doesn't go to P&Z, it doesn't go to council. So once it's approved by the DRB, it goes to CDs. So it deserves a a lot more detail at the front end to get that to that level, which is not evident at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Gushkari. Commissioner Smith. Oh, I'm sorry. Did the applicant want to respond?
Sorry, thank you, Councilwoman Millhaven. I just want to make a comment about the west elevation. Part of the reason why we focused on the vertical breakup of the property and not the horizontal is because the west elevation is broken up with a series of building steps as indicated in our site plan. So unfortunately, when you look at a straight on elevation, it just looks like one large wall. But in reality, that side of the building has several different steps in it, which I know was also brought up earlier about shadow lines, and that could be something that maybe just an extra look at the building to see of how those depths in the steps of the building actually break up the elevation. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I'm going to keep my comments relatively brief because there were many board members with more technical expertise that have brought up quite a few different issues. But I wanted to kind of piggyback a little bit on what Board Member Gushkari said, and that I appreciate the work that the applicant has done, especially up to this point, as far as making things a little more sensitive, responding to some of our comments from a couple of weeks ago. Obviously, the increasing in the landscaping and location of landscaping, getting actually a meeting together with the neighbors, I think was great, and getting some of that input. Obviously, I think we don't have everyone in tow right now. I don't know if you'll be able to do that necessarily, just because you're changing something that has nothing built on it to something that will be built on it. But I just wanted to at least point some of that out, that I appreciate that we got the geotechnical report, although I guess there may still be some technical questions that need to be addressed. So wanted to just at least say that. I know that both in some comments in our packet and even mentioned here, there was some questions about traffic. I just wanted to say that I think as far as a lot of the other uses that could go on here, that this is a pretty low traffic use. I know that the transportation department's probably taken a peek of that road over at Joe Max and everything as well, to see if there's something that needs to be possibly done there, whether this is being built or not. Same thing with some of the questions about the power lines, the utilities being undergrounded. I know there's some conversations with staff, and I guess the major question I have is there's been a lot of technical issues that have been brought up in the meeting today, and I guess the question for staff is kind of just a more procedural one, where are these things that kind of get ironed out? If there was something to be made to be approved today, that could be ironed out after the fact, or is it more important for us to get all these kind of ducks in a row before we actually put an approval forward?
Councilwoman Millhaven, this is Brad Carr and Commissioner Smith. I mean, I guess there's you could handle that two different ways. You could direct staff to do some more work with the applicant, post an approval on some of these items, but I feel like from what I've heard today, I think the board is looking to have a little bit more of that information provided to them before they go to the approval stage. And so we have done in the past where we've worked with applicants on some of those additional items that are still out there after the approval. But generally, we see the board members looking for that information and getting that prior to an approval.
Okay, great. Yeah, I agree with your read, and I was just trying to figure out, what's kind of been done more in the past, if it's things that can be ironed out. But I think you're right that, people the board members may be more comfortable getting more of that information first. But it's my comments for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Smith. I see hands are still raised, so I'll go back down. I'm not sure if they're still raised from before. Board Member Joyner, did you have additional comments?
No, I'm sorry. I just forgot to put my hand down. I apologize.
No worries. Just want to make sure everybody gets their chance. Board Member Faki, did you have additional comments?
No, I'm sorry about that.
No worries. Board Member Brand, did you have additional comments?
Yeah, I was just going to follow up. I do think that one thing that's come up multiple times is understanding. I know the complexity of understanding where building height is measured from is always difficult in these areas that have changes in terrain. So understanding, and that's why I think that a section exhibit that shows natural grade and then finished grade, and essentially a section through this site that shows, because it's unclear at some of these lines that show natural grade on the elevations, if that's at the edge of the site or if that's existing underneath the building and this building is up on a plinth. But understanding, I think that's key for this board to understand the impact of this project, considering the fact that it's being built in an NAOS or a hillside type of district. So that's why I think that the sections are that much more important, not just showing but also showing the wash adjacent and the existing grade versus what's finished. And then the measurements of the building from where that datum is measured from. And maybe staff, I know staff helps out determining that datum point. And I believe that it's an average, or it's based on the adjacent edge of property, or either that or an average of all four edges. I'm not sure if Mr. Card.
Yes, yeah, Councilwoman Millhaven and Board Member Brand, for areas that are not within our environmentally sensitive lands overlay, you are correct that to measure building height, we are looking at adjacent roadways and taking an average of those finished grades along the roadway to establish a baseline for those building heights. However, in areas where we do have that ESL overlay, everything building height is taken from the natural grade. And so it's kind of it's just a moving measurement based on how the terrain slopes on the property. In the graphic that's on the screen right now, that's represented a little bit by that line that's in the white area below each of the elevations. You can see that that's being represented a little bit, at least in these kind of section or these one-dimensional or two-dimensional images of that natural grade. Obviously, this is where we live in the three-dimensional world, so it's not easily to represent just by this one line, but you can see at least in this plane that the grade slopes away on this north elevation from left to right. So you can see there how that difference in elevation is being conveyed there on the natural grade. So it's a moving one, and what we often do is use a roof plan over existing topography to identify the overall height based on the existing grade from the site.
Or I think what's also not understood here is that specifically on this elevation, on the right-hand side of this elevation, you've got a line that's obviously 11 feet below where finished floor level is indicated. Does that mean that there's going to be berming of land up 11 feet directly adjacent to the wash? What's the angle of that natural grade coming down, or is there going to be a retaining wall there? I don't know that we have. It would be nice if that information was in a format in which we could access and digest it on its real world appearance or impact. Because if that's the case, if the footing wall of the below grade is extending up, then that portion of the building is not represented on the elevations. I have a hard time believing that the ground after it exits on the west side of this elevation just stays flat as it's indicated on this elevation. It seems like something is making up that change in grade. So.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good point, and that's not correctly represented there. I believe it slopes away gently back down towards that wash that's on the west side of the property, but it's not shown here on this particular graphic.
Well, in some cases, the outline of that building is only like 8 feet away from the edge of NAOS. So I'm not sure how they're going to slope 11 feet down within they'd have to have some sort of retaining wall there or exposure of the stem wall of the building. So that's, I don't know, maybe a plan also that shows finished grades along that wash corridor. That may help as well.
Okay, great.
All right, I do not see any more hands raised. So would someone like to make a motion?
Councilman Millhaven, this is Michael Joyner. I'd like to move that we continue this case once again.
Okay, do we have a second? Well, first, do we want to set a date?
Yes, Councilwoman Millhaven, that's what I was going to mention. Is that to a date to be determined, or do we want to pick a certain hearing date?
I would say a date to be determined when I think the applicant, after 2 times in front of us, has a pretty good idea what we're looking for. So unless I have to do a date, when she's ready, bring it back.
Okay, certainly we can do that.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a second?
I will second this motion.
Thank you, Board Member Faki. All right, we'll take a roll call vote.
Councilwoman Millhaven,
Yes?
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Board Member Craig,
Yes.
Board Member Joyner,
Yes.
Board Member Gushkari, Board Member Gushkari.
Yes.
Thank you. Board Member Faki,
Yes.
Board Member Brand.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, seeing that we have no additional business, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful holiday. We are
Merry
adjourned.